the 2019 Specialized Stumpjumper. I think this is the Comp Alloy 12-speed version. It's really the only alloy build they do. Of course, they do kind of three different versions of the Stumpjumper itself: a short travel, a long travel, or LT. That's what this is. And they make an Evo version that's even more extreme. But among those three bikes, I think they really are only doing kind of one alloy setup. Of course, then you can still get 29-inch or 27.5-inch wheels. So I guess even if you're looking for an alloy version, there's a number of different ways to go, even if it is just kind of one build kit. But this is a new model for Specialized for 2019, or a new version of the Stumpjumper. You can see kind of this sidearm set up here on the frame, which is really what kind of makes it look like something new. They've done a number of other things to the bike that I think are a lot more important than just making sure it looks like something different. One of the more important things that you probably would never see is they went and did a threaded bottom bracket. Here are the bearings that the pedals spin on, or that the crank arms spin on. I have a threaded setup. This is SRAM's new dub bottom bracket interface that is supposed to be something you can really set up for any type of bike. But this one being a threaded setup where you just thread those bearings right into the frame. If you've ever had a press-in system of any kind, they really do tend to creak. There's a number of things you can do to try and make that better, but I've always had problems with those creaking, and the threaded bottom bracket is just really the way to go as far as I'm concerned. It's something I was really excited about they went back to for the new model here. Something else they've done is they've gone away from some of their proprietary stuff that they used to try and use to set them apart. This shock here is really a standard type of shock from Fox. Doesn't have what they used to call an auto sag, where you can really set the shock up for yourself automatically, which was a nice little feature. But for this bike, they don't have it anymore. They've really improved kind of the shock, I think, and how everything kind of sets up with the standard setup. They don't have that what they call auto sag anymore, which I kind of miss. But the suspension setup they have here seems a lot more improved, a lot more kind of stiff. You feel like you're not kind of wallowing in the travel as much as maybe you used to. The other thing that I really like is they actually increased the reach of the bike, so sort of, well, from a practical standpoint, if you're riding it, you don't feel quite so compact. The kind of distance here is longer. It still actually feels a little short compared to some other bikes you might try, but Specialized did lengthen the bike out a little bit in terms of reach, and that is a nice update to have. I'm probably still going to put a slightly longer stem on here, which is kind of, everybody's always putting shorter stems and wider bars, but for me, I'm a big rider, and having a little bit more reach and spreading my weight out across the bike, especially for just kind of the trail riding I do, is probably going to be a little more ideal. They've also gone to this Fox Rhythm 34 fork, so 34 millimeter lowers on these. I think that's where the 34 comes from. And I've just loved this fork. It's kind of a new thing for Fox, where they're making these rhythm forks a little more affordable. They don't have quite the fancy internals that some of the float models do from Fox, but works really well. I've got a Fox float on my old Stumpy, and I'm sure they've improved on that, but it was a little more, it tended to kind of wallow in its travel a little more too, unless you were messing with it and putting volume spacers in it and things like that. This seems like a better fork actually than the old float I have on my other Stumpjumper from about 2017, I think. Something I really like about the alloy build is this is really the same setup as the Comp Carbon. It costs, I think, about $1,000 more. So basically, you're paying a lot of money for a carbon fiber frame, and there's a lot to be said for carbon. lighter, it can be stiffer. It really is a nice material for building bicycle frame, but it's expensive, and if you do damage a carbon frame, they can tend to fail. So I have a lot of faith in these alloy frames to just take a beating. Never had to replace an alloy frame yet, so it depends on what you're looking for, but for me, I was able to save some money on the frame, get an okay build. It's still kind of the more value-oriented build, if you could say that for something you're spending thousands of dollars on. But I took that savings and actually put some, believe it or not, carbon rims, an Ibis wheel set up here with kind of alloy Ibis hubs and carbon fiber rims. I'm a little nervous about carbon fiber in my rims for the same reason I talked about the frame, but you really, if you've taken a look at Ibis wheels at all, they sell them on, I'm sure you can get them through your local bike shop, but I actually shamelessly went online and bought these. The Ibis wheels, they make a very wide rim for these 29ers. They make an alloy version and a carbon. I put the alloy version on my old Stumpy, and it's just been the best set of wheels I've ever had. So I saved a little bit of money on the frame and then put some really high-end wheels on here that really lighten the bike up considerably. I'm going to try and get some weights on the carbon fiber version of this bike and then see what the weights compare. And saving that weight and the rotating mass of the bike, the wheels, you really do notice a difference. The Specialized makes their Roval, or however you pronounce it, wheels that I've had kind of mixed luck with. I think on these nicer bikes, they're a pretty good set of wheels. I kept them as kind of a backup, but I think going to a kind of a premium set of wheels really liven this bike up considerably, but nothing to worry about if you're buying the bike and going to run the stock wheels. They're a nice wider rim now than they used to be from Specialized, and so it's a good setup. A couple other neat parts of the bike is everybody seems to insist on this internal cable routing now, or the cables and hoses kind of go inside the frame so you don't see them as they travel their way down to the various parts. Personally, I've never really found a lot of advantage to that. I think it would be neat if you really want a cleaner looking bicycle. There's been some rumblings about building kind of integrated brake, handlebar, shifting systems, especially on road bikes. If you didn't have these cables and hoses sitting out here, I think that might be a really neat way to go. But until we do that, and make it reliable and quiet and stuff, I've never been a huge fan of internal cable routing, mostly because it doesn't really seem to do much for me, but it's also, these cables can tend to rattle in here. It is a pain to actually get them routed through the frame, so Specialized is very proud, even on the alloy version, but especially on the carbon fiber versions, this routing is now like fully sealed, where you just feed these cables in. On this bike, you can kind of see they do actually come out about halfway through, and then you have to continue to route them through to this is the derailleur here. But for the most part, even on this alloy bike, routing this is very simple. There are tubes inside the bike that the hoses and cables just run down. So it's much easier. It's been completely quiet. So I guess it's a nice touch if you really do like the internal cables. Again, for me, I could kind of do without it. It's not something I look for. When bikes still have external cable routing, I kind of seek that out actually, because it's a much easier thing to use. Something else that I do like on this bike though is this SRAM NX Eagle drivetrain. Get down here if you can see it. So this is a 1x12 setup, so kind of one gear here in the front and 12 in the back. SRAM came out with 1x12 Eagle a few years ago now, really, and it's been very popular. Like anything, it started off very expensive, and this NX is really affordable. I can't remember what the entire group set cost, but it's in the hundreds, I think, instead of thousands of dollars to put on a bike. So you know, if you're into spending money on your bicycle, it's going to be much more approachable. And the NX setup actually uses a standard kind of Shimano free hub body. So what the cassette here attaches to is pretty standard on most wheels now. When when SRAM started coming out with their own group sets and 11 speed and on, they developed their own kind of free hub body, and that meant you had to get a special one or make sure your wheel came with it. But this kind of lower end, if you will, SRAM setup actually uses that old Shimano free hub. So that's nice, makes it accessible to everybody, and just works great. I'm sure it's a little heavier than its more expensive cousins, but I just haven't had any issues with it. Shifts well, it's quiet, very predictable, incredible range of gears. You really wouldn't look for a front derailleur anymore. That's one advancement that has really improved bicycles, is going away from a front derailleur. It allows for different frame setups, but really, I mean, it gets rid of weight in the derailleur, and that front derailleur is, you know, there's always rubbing. You have to set it up in different ways to make it work well. So it was nice to have the range of gears that a front derailleur offered, but some of these one-buy setups, as they call it, are just doing great things. So I think that's definitely a way to go. Mostly SRAM setup across this bike. The brakes are the new guides, which work okay. I still kind of tend to prefer Shimano brakes, but I really can't complain about these. And then the other kind of last thing to note about the bike, I think, is this X-Fusion dropper post. I think it's called a Manic dropper post. Not the highest end post I've ever seen. There's just, you can't really see it here, but there's just the slightest amount of kind of wobble in it. But it's worked really well. The specialized command post I have on my other Stumpy, which I think is a more expensive post, the rebound is hilariously fast. If you've never seen it, you can just look on YouTube for some of the videos on these command posts, and you know, you drop them, and then when you flip the lever to raise them back up, it's incredible the speed and power these things come back with. So it's nice to get back to kind of a more normal dropper seat post. If you've never run a dropper post, it's been kind of one of the main advances in mountain bikes. It allows you to drop this saddle just way out of your way, and especially as a tall rider, I got my center of gravity up so high and I weigh a lot, so being able to drop the seat and lower my center of gravity so much on descents, and even in just some sketchy areas where I need to drop it just a little bit to get the saddle a little out of the way, has just been huge. And I'm curious how much this thing weighs. This is a heavy bike, well over 30 pounds, and I'm sure stuff like these dropper posts don't help that, but it's been reliable. It's good enough looking, so I think that's definitely something that adds to the bike as a place to start. So overall, this is the Stumpy 2019 Alloy Comp, I think. I'm pretty much set up stock except for the carbon fiber wheels, and I do have a WTB saddle on here. That's kind of my preference, but really a neat bike. I think they've improved a lot. It's a lot quieter with that threaded bottom bracket, and the reach being a little longer is certainly nice. And you know, truth be told, whatever they've done, the sidearm frame or whatever, it certainly feels like a stiffer bike than the old Stumpy. So really a neat machine. I'm enjoying it so far. I've been riding it about 2 months now in Kansas City area, and it's just been perfect.